Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Rebecca and I love all things nature florals, and that's why I decided to start learning how to paint. This is my third acrylic floral painting and I wanted to show you the process mainly because I had a good time doing it, and this is just my third acrylic floral painting. I'm not following any rules. I'm making loads of mistakes along the way and I'm sure you can spot them and comment about them because I'd love to learn. But it was just for fun and doing something inspired by Instagram artists that I love. So I'm going to show you my inspiration. So far, I haven't seen many paintings of dried floral bouquets, and yet there's something about the color scheme of these bouquets, that they're brown and orange and green, and sometimes they have really intense colors, but they also have very interesting textures, and there's like a kind of neutral kind of boho palette to them. And I tried to capture a dried floral bouquet in a previous little miniature watercolor. It was about 2 by 1 inch, so it's really tiny. And then I also tried a larger watercolor painting using the dried floral bouquet scheme with sunflowers and roses and greens. Then a year ago, I discovered the artist Annie Quigley, and then I decided I really wanted to learn how to do these acrylic florals because she had this picture of a wall covered with gorgeous acrylic floral paintings, and I would love to be in a room that looks like that. It just makes me so happy. You find a picture that captures your imagination. Playing around with acrylics, I tried this, and so today I'm giving it another go. This photograph of a bouquet by Jasmine Lindbergh on Instagram was my main inspiration. I started out with a pencil sketch of the composition, very rough, and then I laid down a kind of pinkish brown, which will be the background of the roses. I'm comfortable painting in watercolor, and I kind of cheated. I didn't really think about the structure of the rose. I just ended up doing a background and doing a swirl in a dark color, enhancing that swirl with lighter pinkish highlights, and just trying to make it look rose-like. But really, if you're a real artist, you'd kind of break down the different shapes, which parts are lighter, which parts are darker. You kind of don't have to do that with watercolor, but you do with acrylic because you want it to be more like 3D and play around with light and dark shades. As you can see, I'm kind of thinking like a watercolor artist because that's what I started out doing. So I'm doing a lighter color and then just varying light and dark, kind of a light brown to start with. So brown is the background, and then I slowly add kind of some reds and pinks to it, as well as some oranges. I really like the variation between the dusky colors, the browns, the mauves, and I kind of brought that to the leaves as well. I mixed whatever pink I had with the green that I was making so that the shades of the leaves would be a darker and lighter green that's a little bit dirtied by the pink, if that makes sense. And then I just layered, like I'm not really thinking about lighting or anything too specific or scientific. I'm just literally dabbing greens on top of each other so they look varied. It looks like I have a plan, like I'm thinking about lighting and all that, but I'm actually not. I'm just randomly dabbing different colors together, hoping they will form a rough shape of a leaf. I started painting some abstract beige leaves, and then I decided let's do some black around the entire border of the painting. I mixed in some green and blue and yellow just to give it a little bit of depth and like a different tone, and varied my brush strokes all around and just covered the border everywhere where there wasn't going to be any florally bits I put the black paint, and I also try to blend it in and make it a little gray in some of the parts. Again, it's just playing around in varying colors. Acrylic is so different from watercolor. I'm not entirely used to it yet, and I hate how it kind of messes up my brushes. Watercolor keeps your brushes very delicate and fine, but acrylic kind of makes them wear out very quickly. In any case, you have the texture, you have the permanence of it. It dries as you paint. You have the different way the colors interact. They don't really, form textures on their own. You have to add the shades, you have to add the texture. You can't just add water and then let it lighten, or add a dab of more pigment and it just darkens. You really have to be a lot more precise and deliberate when doing acrylics. Yet I still paint like watercolor is my so-called first language. It's bigger, fuzzier, less precise, and it has more like a dynamic flow to it. I feel that I try to capture, and I want it to be like an acrylic painting that still feels a little bit like a watercolor painting. I laid down a big blob of brown orange paint, and I also made the border of it spiky. So this is going to be the dahlia. Dahlias are to me like a daisy with the petals all going towards the center, and I'm keeping the principle of the petals really simple for this one because I've never painted dahlias before. So I'm going to do a light V on the outside of each petal and then a dark shade on the inside, and I'm going to play around with light and dark tones, and maybe like a little bit more of a pinkish hue, a bit more of a brown hue, but basically a light V on the outside and dark center, and then maybe some mid-tones to blend it all out. And I painted and repainted and repainted all the petals many times. I feel like I could have stopped halfway and it would have looked better, but you know how it's like. You experiment, you go, and sometimes the more you do, the less you like it, but that's okay. So I kept going, kept repainting those V's, and as I went along, because the shades of the paint that I was using, the colors that I was mixing organically kind of changed, so there were more shades to this dahlia. It had like really complex shades, even though I didn't plan it that way. I actually wanted a maroon dahlia, but when I mixed red and black, the colors just turned out to be a grayish red. I couldn't get a rich maroon, and I may need to buy a rich maroon paint if I really want that. I'm actually just trying to finish up all my paint supplies before I go off to college, so I only have black, white, red, yellow, and blue, and so kind of limited, but managed to still come up with some kind of orangey maroon anyway. I learned how to do watercolor loose florals from Shada Campbell's videos. They're really great, and so I start with the big flowers like roses, dahlias first, then I randomly fill in leaves that basically I invent as I go along, and then finally you kind of need to fill out the space that you haven't used. So in this case, I decided to try dabbing like little clouds, tiny little clouds, to make I think either baby's breath or forget-me-nots, but let's call them forget-me-nots, little cloudy little white blobs, and then maybe some green blobs in between to look like abstract leaves, and in the center of the white blobs just a little bit of orangey brownish little dots of orange, brown, and yellow to be like the center of the forget-me-nots. My loose florals, because they are organically designed as I paint, it means that the composition isn't always balanced, which means that you kind of need to add little leaves or something abstract around the outside so that it looks centered and that it doesn't have a weird mass on the canvas or the watercolor paper. So in this case, I decided to fill in whatever space was left with pampas grass because they are abstract enough, and I could do them in like pinkish white, beigeish white, and white, and then maybe some leaves here and there. But pampas grass, I was trying to figure out, because my brush is very blunt, how to do that the shape of it, how to get fine lines. And finally I decided, let's go fuzzy, use a dry brush with just very little paint on it and spread it so that it looks fuzzy, rather than trying to do really fine lines and getting ugly chunky lines instead. So one thing that I can't do with acrylic is fine lines, and I also can't really do branches. My branches are always really ugly, so the fewer branches, fewer fine lines that I try to do, the better the painting is going to look overall. We have neared the end of the painting. The color mixing was completely unplanned. The composition was semi-planned, but also evolved organically as I played around with the paints. You could keep dabbling, you could keep correcting things, adding more colors, more details, but at some point you kind of have to stop. For me, that's when my attention span kind of runs out, and most of my paintings are done really quickly, half an hour, 1 hour, 1.5 hours at the most. But I really try not to spend too long, and I don't work on a painting in more than one sitting. That's just my style. I'm more of a quick sketch kind of amateur. The sun was setting and I decided, okay, it's time to get a picture. Overall, really pleased with how it turned out. Enjoy the process. Going to try more acrylic painting, probably a landscape for the next video. If you're interested in watching more painting videos, do let me know. I have many hobbies and interests, as you know, on this channel, and often I just make the videos that I enjoy making, that I feel like making at any point in time, whatever projects come to mind. And it's basically how this channel has been ongoing for more than 10 years. It's a little bit of a journal and a blog of my life. Stay tuned for more, and I look forward to making more videos. Bye!